Can hear you now.
Yeah.
There we go.
So much for the nice professional mic I just set up and headset. I'll get this stuff straight. You'd never know I used to be an Echo, would you?
Were you?
Yeah, I was. I was an Echo.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, I was a Bravo, so I don't understand any of it. So
well, there's two kinds of 18 Echoes. Okay, I have a theory on this. I actually didn't. Actually, it's not even my theory. It's my old team sergeant's theory because he was an Echo too. So you get two kinds of Echoes. You got the guys who are like really like tech savvy. They're into it. You know, in the old days, they were the ham radio guys. These days, they're the computer guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you got the guys who really wanted to be a Bravo, but they got told they were going to be an Echo. So the price of admission for all the good stuff was making sure the radios work right. That was it. Yeah. Everything was as simple as possible. I didn't try to be fancy. None of that. It was just like, how simple is this so I don't have to mess around with it. Go do all the stuff I really want to do.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I was. That's what we get for scoring too high in the ASVAB or something. They were like, "Oh, you're an Echo." I started out as a medic, and they were like, "Oh yeah." They're like, "Oh, you would about quarter way through. They're like, you would make a great Bravo."
Well, it's even worse. Yeah. It's even worse because I had AMIC. Like I had. That's how old I am. Okay. So I went there and like this is the way I'm wired, right? Like I hate losing. I hate failing. Like I just.
Yep.
I can't abide it, right? So we're sitting there with the old. It was on Commodore 64s no less, and they were ancient then. So we're sitting there in the code lab, and you got the headset on all day, and you're listening to and you're writing everything down, right? And my buddy, Rick McCoy, former recon, he already had like tinnitus and hearing loss. He was a code, like he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And at the end of each day, he had just this zombie apocalypse look on his face, like just wiped out every day, and he failed AMIC.
Yeah.
So they made him a Bravo. I was so upset, man. I was like, all I had to do was fail?
I know.
If you told me that, I'd have just flunked and been a Bravo. But I just couldn't do it.
Oh, man. I wanted to pass the medic course. Not because I want to be a medic, but the same reasons you did.
Yeah.
And just those written tests, they'd be like, okay, here's your options. Answer number 1, A, B, and C. Wait, what? Answer number 2, A and C. Answer number 3, D and E. 4, D only, or E, all of them. You're like, no, that's not how you, there should be a clear answer. It's not like, oh, both of them are right. Like, no, one or the other. It went from like 25% to like God knows what fucking percent. There's no way. They were like, man, you're really good at hands-on stuff, but man, you can't pass a written test. I was like, I know. I need to be Bravo.
Yeah. Oh, dude, So, like, have you met Frank Proctor?
Actually, I met him in the airport like a month ago.
You told me that, yeah.
Yeah, he was on my flight from New Hampshire to the layover.
So Frank was an Echo too, right? And I love, like, Frank has a great way about him, the way he answers things.
Yeah.
And somebody asked him once, hey, man, were you an 18 Bravo? And Frank, in that, like one half deep thought philosopher, other half good old boy Alabama guy.
Yep.
Goes, nah, man, I was an 18 Echo, heavy on the 18.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so I got one more funny story to tell you before we get started on the serious stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So my wife, right? My wife Angela has RBF. Like she always looks like she's angry, no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, so do I, pretty much.
I was gonna say I do too, so I get it.
That's where I'm going with this, right? So she's decided that I have RWF. I have resting war face.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
So when we put up the IG thing, advertising this, she just looks at it. She looks at me and she goes, "Who's the other dude with RWF?"
That's the nicest thing she's ever said to me. Thank you.
All right, so you want to get started, man? Let's talk.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
So I kind of had a thought on this as like a way to start out. If you're willing to roll this way, and then we'll just let it branch and
Yeah.
winter off however it wants. Caffeine. So I was thinking that, we're talking about this. Obviously, we're thinking about it like for us, like for the kind of classes we're doing and what we do.
Right.
But really, to be fair, like there's more than one kind of instructor's role. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
think about like when you're training in games. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to get guys from 0 to a functional level as quick as possible in groups.
Yeah.
And you don't have time for a lot of, subtle coaching cues or going deep in the weeds on things or mentoring people. And you're not really trying to help them set up their own training because let's face it, there's not going to be their own training when you're not around making them do it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, that's like one kind of training. And that kind of like segues into like, think about, privates in the military or recruits in the police academy. Like
Yep.
there's a certain base level you have to get guys to in large groups. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there so that guys don't there's no misunderstanding about what we're talking about. That's really not where I figured the thrust of our conversation would go. Because one of the things I think we do as a profession, not so much as an industry, it's not so much for guys like you and me and other guys that are out there on the circuit, but more just as a profession. I think people tend to train others the same way when they're experienced and have been around a long time as they do when they're brand new. And I understand the whole, keeping things simple and, obviously you want things to be functional, simple, repeatable, and that. But if you're going to do this stuff for a living for 20 or 30 years, there's some subtleties you might want to explore after a few years. You know? So, like, I kind of think that, like, for us, this topic is more like how we would want our role to be, how we can help people, how we want to kind of help the person who wants to be a master of their craft, not just a journeyman apprentice. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. No, I definitely see that. I think we're in a weird, like where we sit in this, coming into this industry or from our military, law enforcement, you got law enforcement experience. I don't, just military, but coming from that experience, when we were training guys, it was exactly that. It was training a set of people. There was no, okay, you're going to excel, so let's help keep you getting better, this and that. It was a flat line, just get them to this next bar across the board. It's good. And I think the big difference for what we see now compared to that was, oh, thanks, babe. I appreciate it. My wife brought me some dinner. So, so I think one of the big things is, and you've noticed it too, when we have people show up for a class, these people really, really, really want to be there.
Yeah.
And with the military, that's not always the case. Different units or different cultures or whatever. I think we're pretty fortunate in that regards that people want to be there. So when we're talking about the role of the instructor and you say that group class or that group, military, get them to that base level kind of thing. For me in my classes, I don't view it that way. I view it very differently because of the motivations. But yeah, you're right. In that main aspect, it's just, I think people misunderstand that. When you look at a unit, nobody cares that you got people that excel. They care about the mean average of the whole unit as it goes up, or that whole class, or training, evolution, or someone goes to some law enforcement training, like say an instructor certification or something like that. They just want to get that base level. I think it's wildly different than what we do in our open enrollment classes.
And like I guess kind of something that I feel pretty strongly about too is like, if I have a guy for 2 days, right? Even if we just burn it down on reps, even if I can get him through 1,500 rounds in 2 days, which is a huge amount, right? Just,
Yeah, that's a lot.
Even if you can, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
It's still just 2 days. It's just a
Exactly.
snapshot of this guy's training lifetime.
Yeah.
And if someone is serious and is training on their own, like, I think the best thing I can do for them is teach them how to train, teach them how to kind of self-evaluate, self-coach.
Yeah.
How to design their training template, their training program, so that it's more productive and more efficient.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying too. I was talking about this the other day with somebody. when you're trying to get somebody to a baseline, it's reps on those specific tasks, right? I need you to do this. I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And then your chief are trained. And like in this new industry that I'm kind of new at this compared to a lot of guys that have been around there teaching classes. I've only done this for a couple of years. But the big difference I see is when we have a enrollment class, like an open enrollment where there's a group of people coming, we got 2 days. I have to give you as much as I can in 2 days so that, one, you realize what all your problems are so you can annotate that. You know what to do to fix it, diagnose it, fix it, correct it. But you're not going to go from, a 2-shooter to an 8-shooter in 2 days. But as long as we can get everything and pack everything in, at least you got the information to when you do go train. Then you go, oh man, I didn't know what he was talking about, but you kind of get this down. It's like, oh, click. Now I can take that day 2 information or later on in day 1 or some other part you heard, and now you can focus on that and incorporate it. And to me, it's kind of about not everything we can do right then. Like, I don't care if I get someone's draw stroke perfect in a 1-day class, in one day that I see them in a class. I want them to get it better, but I want them to realize what right is. Then we can move on so they can reinforce that on their own, because we got to get as much in there as possible. Because it's kind of the long road, I guess, or the long game. Like, I know if I can give you all this, in 6 months it'll be better. But if I just hammer this, basic fundamentals because you can't move on until you get that right, well then I'm not giving you everything you need, and that'll only last you a month. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like something else that I think about it too is I think people are kind of afraid to experiment in their own training. You know what I mean? Like, and
yes.
You have to give people the understanding that they have to give themselves permission to fail, permission to experiment, to figure this stuff out, because it's not just, we tend to learn a lot by modeling. Like, you look at somebody that does well and you try to do it exactly like them. And sometimes that can be erroneous. Like, I had a jiu-jitsu instructor once who had a bad back, right? Guy, Japanese guy, really good. So his technique always involved like this ramrod to the lower back, right?
Yep.
But that wasn't because that was necessarily the ideal form for whatever technique he was doing, because he had to, because he had a bad back.
Yeah.
You look at all of his students and they emulate that ramrod straight lower back because they're modeling after him and not understanding why he's doing that particular thing, right?
Right.
Or like my draw stroke. I have a really fast draw. I'm really proud of it. But I have this hip motion in my draw stroke that I think comes from martial arts, from punching, right?
Yep.
And I've tried to get rid of it because I have a fast draw stroke. It's not a limiting factor.
Right.
But I would never tell anybody else to imitate that, because you don't need it. It's something like that's hanging around from my prior training life that isn't hurting me. But if you imitate it, you might be hurting your draw stroke.
Yeah. That does. And I think that's the perfect analogy. So you ever look around through social media or see guys shooting that you train with? And I love seeing guys that have a very specific, what do you call style, right? I had a guy, and he's a big fan of Frank Proctor, right? And why not? Frank's amazing. He's great. When you watch this guy shoot, I mean, his motion, how he puts that gun, how he rolls that non-firing hand onto the gun is exactly, that same thing. And it presents and it just drops right there. The way he does that hand and the way his arms are bent a little bit more, just the way he shoots and the angles he can get with his wrist compared to his forearm. He literally looks exactly like, if you could put him in a Frank Proctor costume, you'd think it was Frank Proctor, right? He shoots his rifle the same, everything. And cool, because I'm not gonna lie, Frank Proctor looks beautiful when he shoots. Like, it's incredible, right? The guy does. Like, it's one of those things you're like, you make it look so easy, but how are you going so you know what I mean? It's great. And then you see other guys like Bob Vogel. You watch Bob Vogel shoot. He shoots very differently, really locks those arms out and really cants that hand even more to where the thumb is lower than that frame, almost to the trigger guard. And I'll see some guys shoot like that. I'm like, oh, it's kind of influenced here, influenced there. Yeah. But just like you said, and I always try and say this, like, here's the concept of how I want you to draw. Here's like how angles work. Here's what you should do. When guys are like, I see you doing this, and do I look like that? I'm like, it doesn't matter if you look like me shooting, but we got to find what looks like for you. And so here's a good example. Angle of the elbows. I get this asked a lot. Guys are like, should my elbows be up higher, down lower, somewhere in the middle? I'm like, so what's the goal? You know, and they're like, well, the goal is to maximize, you know, recoil management, right? I'm like, well, yeah, you know, as long as it's not causing problems, yes,
Right.
do that. And they're like, okay. I was like, well, how do you do that? Get as much contact patch on the frame as possible. I'm like, cool. Put your hands out like this, right? They put their hands out like this, you know, and they put their hands around mine, so it's clasping it together. I'm like, great, squeeze as hard as you can, right? Cool. Now roll your elbows up. Now you see where that motion comes away from right there at the top. Now you got it on the top. You roll the elbows down and you get more pressure on the bottom. So where do you have pressure all around? And I had a guy go, I have pressure all around, and no shit, his elbows were like here. And I could feel it, pressure all around, but his elbows were up higher. Another person, their elbows were down lower and somewhere in the middle. So when we look at that modeling like you're talking about, yes, those are good cues, and see how different people do it, but realize you're not going to look exactly like them. Like, I'm not going to look like Bob Vogel or Frank Proctor, because they're both like, what, 6'something, 6'2", 6'3". They got these long ass arms, you know?
6'4". I think he's an inch taller than me.
Yeah, I was shocked. When I saw Frank at the airport, I was like, hey, how you doing? Holy shit, man, he's a big dude.
Well, and like grip, right? So, like, I mean, remember the old Clint Eastwood movie, Every Which Way But Loose?
I mean, I've heard of it,
With the
but
orangutan?
I've never seen it.
With the orangutan?
Oh, yeah.
Look at my hands, dude. I'm I'm the orangutan, right?
Yeah.
6'3", and I got like these, like, you know, they're not thick, but they're just like these, like, they look like orangutan hands, you know?
Yeah.
I'm actually lucky that my thumbs are even opposable. So my grip's going to look a certain way compared to someone with a different hand structure. It's just
Exactly.
principles matter, but you have to make it fit the structure of your hands.
Like, if your grip is in a certain way where you can't reach the trigger on a Glock, that's because you're probably too high up and down. So I'll tell you, like, hey, can't that hand like this, put the thing here, you can reach that trigger farther. Because I have people with fingers that are like, you know, this is my hand this long, you know, so they need to change that, you know, because you can't fire the gun if you can't pull the trigger. So maybe you need to change that. Your grip's not going to look like this person or this person. Someone on here said something pretty cool. A lot of people say the Weaver stance was born due to an injury to Weaver.
I saw that. I've heard that. I actually have heard that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that too. It would be interesting if it was.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. You know, some guy's got a hip problem. He's like, yeah, it must be the best way because I shoot better than you and I stand like this, you know, like, makes sense.
And somebody earlier asked about timers and training, and I just wanted to respond real quick that if you're serious about training, you absolutely need a timer. How
do you know how fast you're going? Like, you can't get faster without a timer, you know, and go, oh, well, I need to go quicker because I know I can do it in this.
Yeah. And think about this too, right? Like, because I know you do BJJ, you're a martial artist, right? So
I like doing it. I'm not, by no means of my experience. I'm just a blue belt, right? But I fell into it later in life after. So I don't want to be thinking like, oh, he's a damn black belt. Like, well, no. But I can probably kick most people's ass.
So, like, think about this. Like, shooting is really cool because it's the only martial endeavor that I know of where everything is hard data.
Yes, I never thought of it like that. That's good.
Because, I mean, think about this. You know, you spar with someone, you know how you did relative to them in that particular moment. Doesn't mean how well you would do every time. You know, it's just, there's so many variables, so many things, but it's very subjective, right? Mm-hmm. When you learn to strike, you learn how to feel what making your hands heavy feels like. You learn how to feel what going fast feels like, right? But there's no hard data. With shooting, you have every split, every draw, every transition, and you have the targets. So you literally have all the hard data.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you use it?
Yeah. And then if you do video coaching and you use Shot Coach or use Coach's Eye, you can literally break down the timing on not just moving from point A to point B, but how long did it take me to stand up from that lean and start my movement?
Yeah.
How much time did I lose because my gun wasn't up high enough when I came around that piece of. So you can actually, it's not the only athletic endeavor, but it's the only combative endeavor I can think of where you literally have hard data for everything you do. Which if you that can shortcut your learning curve so well if you pay attention to it and look at it.
Absolutely. And this one guy said on here, hold on, no timers and instructors shouldn't demo ruins. Respect, Brian. Miss you, dude. So one guy said a dead body and how fast you were able to achieve, that is hard data, facts. And then they said all true as well. So I get what you're saying, man. I think some people too, there's a difference in like the game and practice, right? Like look at professional sports. Like in the game, nobody gives a shit about your bench press time or bench press time, Jesus. Your bench press max, your 40-yard time, your shuttle run time, you know, all this stuff, or how high you can jump and this and that. All they care is that did you catch the ball? Did you win the game and score enough touchdowns to do it?
Yeah.
But in practice, those guys lift weights. They drill. That's what you're doing. You're drilling just like you do in martial arts, or just like you do dry fire drilling, dry fire, all this other stuff, just like we do when you go to the range. So we practice our skill sets, our fundamentals, our mechanics, and then we hope to transfer those to abilities that we practice on the range by doing courses of fire or, you know, El Prezes. So when that time comes, you win the game. Yeah. So I get what, but you can't, you know, I think a lot of people, so in training, so what's your take on realistic training, right? Like we use that a lot, and they say, hey, this is scenario is to simulate when, you know, you're in a crowd and like you're Gaddafi and you're muggled, you know, snatched up by the crowd and people trying to stab you or something, right? Whatever, man. It's like, okay, but nobody's actually doing that. So to do that still, I need to work on my split times. I need to work on my draw. I need to work on my turns, my vision, because none of it matters. You know, if you do that, you'll get better at surviving something in real life.
Yeah, and like, first off, real quick, somebody asked if I thought USPSA was beneficial. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of ties into my feedback to what you just said too, man. So like, people lose sight of the fact that this stuff is still an athletic endeavor. Like if you're an SF guy, if you're a SWAT cop, if you're a regular cop, if you're a regular soldier, if you're just a civilian who carries to defend yourself, like the actual application of this is very much athletic. Like it really is.
Yeah.
You know, you're on a team. You're on a team if you're on an ODA, without a doubt. So people lose sight of the fact that you should train these skills like an athlete trains. You were kind of touching on that. You know, the whole train like you fight thing, train for the fight, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to train things in isolation. You need to put them together in like aggregate, right?
Yeah.
In larger drills and kind of see how they shake out. And then you need to test them.
Yeah.
And that's like the scenario comes in place. That's when the live fire shoot house or the stress shoot, or, you know, that's you're testing yourself, or the ultimate test is the tick, right? The ultimate test is the thing. But the training's not the test, and the test isn't the training. You know?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think people lose sight of that. I think people, they want to continually simulate the event, when too much simulating the event is actually detrimental to the development of skill, I think. You know? Yes,
because then you're not running it as efficiently as you could be over and over and over and over. So you're really never going to get that much better unless you isolate every part of it. So yeah, I completely agree completely. Jesus. Sorry, it's been a long day, man. I was a little lightheaded when I got home. I've been at the range since, it's like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to get the range. So I've been there from like 11 to 5 o'clock tonight. So we broke in that Staccato. I shot about 750 rounds through it.
Yeah.
You know, when you find like old ammo, you're like, oh, I forgot I had that in the bottom of your range box. Well, it was all that junk. I mean, some of it had spray glue on it. I was like having to rub off, but shot great, man. So just doing that. So anyway, yeah, I agree completely.
So back to the topic. So how, like, role of the instructor, based on everything we were just talking about, it sounds like we're in agreement. Like, how do you structure the class so that you can kind of not only drive those points home, but give guys an example of how to structure the training like that, like how they have to do that. You know, like,
yeah,
like I'll take, like, the first day, I'll start out with stuff that's very isolated, you know, working on skills in isolation, and then start like stringing them together by the end of the first day, and start hitting the ground running on the second day, start like making bigger and bigger problems for them to solve, you know, because it's kind of cool too. You watch people that do too much of one or the other. It seems like their performance and the skills in isolation doesn't match their performance on those same skills once you put them together. right?
Yep.
They grade just because they're in conjunction with other skills, you know? So you have to kind of, I think, train that aspect of it too. Like get people to kind of be consistent when they start making the problems harder and have more to think about, and they start having more cognitive load, right? Less bandwidth of people to play with.
Yep. Yeah, I do pretty much the same thing. I'm sure we're probably pretty similar. But the cool thing is you do it your way, I do it my way, and I think that's the best part about people going to classes. They ask me, "Oh, where should I go next?" Like, if they're on our tech team, just go to them. But we're going to get different things from different instructors. But that progression, like you're talking about, like we start off like with the most basic thing, and then before you know it, when that shooter, that student has that like, oh, I just drew and shot and just did all that, and I haven't done this before, that all put together smoothly like that. It didn't do it as well. And I keep getting these damn pop-up windows from like emails and crap. So having them do that and put that together, I think that's that big key, but it's got to keep going. And like you talked about, having that cognitive stress or even the bandwidth or whatever it may be, having that point where you go, hey guys, we got to put it all together now. Whatever our definition of all together is for a level 1, and then a level 2 do the same thing. But it's all got a, what I don't want to use culmination exercise, but like the application. Like you have to show them the application of each skill you taught, I guess is the kind of the way I think about it.
Like something I think is important too is the other thing that's kind of cool about shooting, you know, and this, I'm going to dive back into the martial arts side of things for a second again too, right? Because well, shooting's a martial art.
Yes, so many parallels.
Well, it is. I mean, it's an art that's used in war, right? It's a martial art.
Yeah.
By the pure definition of the word. So, you know, there's all this talk in like martial arts philosophy about mindset, about Zen. You know what I mean? And athletic coaches talk about, you know, the flow, or, you know, they use whatever. It's all the same thing. That's what they're talking about. But like shooting is dependent so much on that, because the moment you're not allowing the process to happen, the moment you're trying to force it to happen, the moment you're trying to make it happen, everything starts to fall apart. And I think that's like a huge value of these longer, you know, drills, these longer like shooting problems you give people with movement and various stations to hit different targets of various difficulties. And, you know, like that shows people that if they can simply kind of remain present in the process, if they can just be present in their shooting, just kind of let the vision and the input drive their trigger press, you know, then it works out. And the moment they try to force it and they try to burn it down, and, you know, that's when everything falls apart. And I really liked there was like a 3-part thing you did, I think, about that. You were talking about why people miss. And it's all the same stuff, right? And like that concept alone, man, if you can get that through to your students, even if they can't replicate it in your class, even if they can just kind of understand it and understand how to drive towards developing that, how to structure their training so they can find that place, that moment where they're just being present in shooting. They're just, to quote Frank again, they're just letting it do. Right?
I love that term.
That's just, that's where you have to be. And then think about the real thing. Think about, you know, the stuff you've done. That's the place you find when stuff's going down for real. Like, because your training just takes over, and you trust your buddies, and you're just letting the process be the process. You're not worried about the outcome. You're not rushing things. You're not being frantic. You're not worried. You're just letting the process be the process. And that's the lesson. If people can replicate that in training, especially if you like the second half of the second day, I do a lot of like internal competition stuff with my guys, and not because, you know, the students are necessarily going to compete. It's not that. It's because that's that mental stress, right? So if they can learn to just pay attention to the process while everybody's being the peanut gallery and people looking for bragging rights and trying to beat each other, like that's the biggest benefit I think USPSA has for the tactical shooter. Is, for me at least, it's way more stressful than the real thing. A fight's just a fight, but you don't want to look bad in front of your buddies. Like that's way worse. That's way worse than the fight.
And someone's got a camera, you're like, oh shit. There goes my reputation. You know, I just lost 1,000 followers. So somebody asked we had a couple of questions on here. Just going back, and somebody asked a question, kind of what you're talking about. Where is it at here? So aim small, miss small. I teach my students on the B27 to an 8x5 to a 5x7 at 5 yards ad nauseum before we begin movement. We tighten shot groups before we begin movement. Thoughts on that? So the kind of thing that goes back to what you had mentioned and how we structure the training and everything else. Obviously, there's kind of a couple mindsets, depending on the class you have or, who you're training and everything else. What's your thoughts on that? Then it kind of tied into something else you were saying about like giving personal feedback, in a class kind of thing. But what do you think about kind of progressing that way?
I look at it a little bit differently, but I think it ties into what the guy that asked the question was saying. And it definitely ties into what you're saying. Like, I think that it's important to teach people the way their sight should look and the way their trigger should feel, the press should feel, based on the difficulty of the target.
Yes.
I think that, and you should start out with, more slow aim, fire, precision stuff. Absolutely. Get those fundamentals, right? But then I think one of the things we do as tactical shooters, because that kind of encompasses professionals as well as, serious amateurs, right? Is we tend to default, and I understand why. We do it because it's hammered into our heads from the very beginning that we're accountable for every round, right?
Yep.
So we tend to default to the most precise sight picture and the most meticulous or careful trigger press for every shot fired.
Yeah.
That's a limiting factor after a while because you don't need that for every shot.
Yeah.
And time matters in a gunfight. If you don't think it does, you haven't paid attention to the cyclical rate of like an AK-47.
Yeah. Yeah.
It matters,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, yes, you need to make sure you use a sighting technique and a trigger technique that is appropriate for complete accountability on the shot you're taking. Absolutely. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean you need equal height, equal light, crystal clear, sharp front sight, and a slow, staged, then careful rolling surprise break. Like you
Right.
don't
Yeah. No.
So I think it's important to kind of get people to, in training, right, to learn to play around with those things and to see what they need and start developing that data for that processor.
Yeah.
To take the cognitive load off, right? So once you have all that data and you know what it feels like to press the trigger the right way, or you know what you need to see for a particular shot difficulty, then it can start happening when you see it, And it's like one of the things I really hate is when people tell people to go faster or slower.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at it backwards. The speed is a byproduct of what you needed to do to make the hit. You know what I mean? If it's a low percentage shot, if it's a hostage taker shot at 10 yards or beyond, and all you've got is a piece of the guy's head, you need to see something very specific and very careful. You need to be very sure of your trigger press, right? Mm. So needing to see what you need to see and pressing the trigger the way you need to press it will determine how fast that shot happens. And you can't make it happen any faster because you likely miss and you can't afford to. It's got to be, like Chuck Pressburg says, it's got to be a no-fail shot, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But then the converse is you're at contact distance with a guy and you don't even really need to see anything apart from your normal body alignment and the index you developed.
Yeah.
You're taking your time like you would. And see, I used it too. I used taking your time. You're being as careful as you need to be for that difficult shot.
Yeah.
You may lose because you're not getting the shot off quick enough.
So you had said like slowing down, right? You hate when people say slow down to get your hits or speed up or whatever. At the beginning of the class, I usually tell people, I'm like, all right, everyone's heard the term slow down. You're good, slow down and get your hits. If you're missing, you need to slow down. So to me, and it kind of goes back to what this guy's talking about, and I'll address that in a second, but to me, it's not about slowing down. It's go at a speed where you can think and feel your way through it. Because if you can think and feel your way through it, then I know you're executing each point that you should be to achieve the end result. If you can do that, well, then those 3 steps or whatever, 5, whatever it took, 5 becomes 3, 3 becomes 1, and then 1 becomes automated over time or something like that. But a lot of people want to rely on just slow down and get your hits, or do this, or you have to be able to do this exactly perfectly before we move on to this movement thing or anything like that, kind of like he's talking about. I don't want to put a B8 in front of him and say, all right, guys, this many rounds. You can't move on until you get this many rounds. And then, okay, then the next one, the next one. To me, that's like training to like, okay, you achieve this bar. Now we can move on and achieve the bar. But if you can understand, to me, they're never going to learn that concept. And they might be the concept of what it means and how you actually get the shot to happen, how you pull the trigger straight to the rear. You have your reference point. What are you supposed to feel? How do you, get leverage on that gun to recoil management, all those things. If you have a training program where it's like, well, we're not going to go here, so you can shoot this right. It's like, okay, but it kind of goes back to the personal feedback that you're talking about. Well, if you're just doing that, then you rely on them to get there on their own, and then you're moving on and you show them the next thing. I'd rather you get the concept. It'll buff itself out and smooth out over time as you figure it out. Understand the concept, achieve the result. Do that, then we'll see that drop. But I'd rather get somebody into movement sooner, because if they're moving, not sooner, acceptable levels of accuracy. But if you start moving and then you see what that sight looks like move around, you're like, holy crap. Then I go, hey man, stand right here and shoot that 6-inch circle at, 10 meters. And they're like, oh, this is super easy. Ting, 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 like, okay, well, cool. So that makes it seem a lot easier because that sight's not moving around as much. So now you stop and you can shoot it, So I think some people get hung up on, we can't move on till we can do this perfectly. And then this next thing perfectly, this next thing. You're going to be standing on the flat range shooting for a really long time and not ever moving on, because what's perfect to that person are you. And there's always something to go, well, I shouldn't do this, because they don't know what to do, or they don't want to progress, or they're like, well, I need to get this right. They never push themselves farther than just that little bit.
Well, and then like I love performance, right? I love reading about like how to develop performance. I'm kind of a geek for this stuff, right? So they figured out the best ways to practice, especially for adults. It's not to hammer on one thing for hours and hours.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's interleaving practice. It's, you do this for a bit, then you go do this for a bit.
Yeah.
When you come back to that, it's kind of percolated, it's kind of settled in. There's so much that happens at the subconscious level for athletic skill. You have to kind of let it seep in and germinate up in there and take root.
Yeah.
And if you practice different things, you'll actually make progress more efficiently than if you work on one thing for a long period of time.
Have you seen that new, it's a documentary. It's called, I think, Achieving Greatness or something. I watched it on an airplane.
Yeah, I want to. It's on my list. I haven't seen it yet.
Dude, it is really, really good. And he talks, so it has like Wayne Gretzky and Pele, Venus and Serena Williams, and it talks to all their dads and everybody who, kind of got them started and why these are the greatest athletes of our time. Jerry Rice is on there, a host of others. Well, it goes through this, and they're talking, and Wayne Gretzky, I won't forget this part. He's like, he was on a team, like a hockey team when he grew up. And there was another hockey team that was like the all-stars. They were specialists. They've been trained on this since they were so young. And they were the best. And they beat Wayne Gretzky's team. Not one of those kids made it to the NHL. Not one. And they were the chance. And they were literally, Wayne Gretzky's team, he had 3 guys in the NHL on his team. And they weren't a winning team. But when it comes down to it, one thing they showed about each of these kids, and whether it's kids or adults or whatever, they let them just play. Nothing specific. They told them, hey, practice, play baseball and football and hockey or whatever other sports too, because what you learn there, you can translate that back over here. And that gives your brain a rest. You'll get good at this, and then you can come back and get good at this. You're not just going to get burned out and cycling over and over and over on the same stuff you've always done and then not want to progress or not care or whatever it is. It was just really talking about, it's a lot like that. Okay. If you're focusing on one thing for too long. Can you hear me now? Did I lock up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah, and that's kind of a broad, comparison, but I think in not specializing in one specific thing with your shooting or just this only, move on to something else. When you're doing that, great. You've executed a number of times, good. Once you start kind of going down, move to something else, man. Doing something different can only make you better at what you're doing, and you're going to stay creative or whatever it may be. But I think there's some kind of little parallel there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's how people who are good at things, I think, practice. Look at how musicians practice who are really good, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of former musicians who are good shooters because
Scott was saying that.
they learned how to practice.
Yeah. Well, he was saying too, the finger dexterity
Yeah.
of doing all that. I was like, that's a good point. But yeah, they learn how to practice. You're right.
Yeah. It's hard to move just this finger.
Yeah.
It isn't easy.
No, it's not. I got to like teach people to trick their brain and like pretend like, this, whatever, with the hands, but it's hard. Very hard for shooters.
That's an interesting question. And I apologize to everybody because I've seen a lot of good questions go by and it's just hard to keep up. But FM Gunner there, that's an interesting one.
Which one's that?
It was right before the one we just had. How do you deal with students who believe their method is best and won't try a different one?
All right. Well, that's what makes some people great, some people good, and some people suck. So, no, it's a good question. Not trying to minimize it, but
I think that, and like this, I think is important too, right? Like Harris, the guy who wrote Silence of the Lambs, right? He wrote the sequel Hannibal, and there's a quote in Hannibal I really like. It's technique is the religion of the dangerous trades, right? So guys who go into harm's way for a living develop like this religious dogma about technique.
yes.
Instead of thinking about the principles should be the religion, not the technique itself. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like about CQB, think about how much CQB has changed since
Oh, man.
I was a new guy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It changes every 2 years. Every
Yeah.
2 years, it's changing up.
And it keeps getting better, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The principles haven't changed.
No.
The techniques keep getting better and better and better.
Yep.
Look at shooting. Look at any of the old like Lenny McGill VHS tapes, right? How to shoot fast and accurately.
Yeah.
The principles are the same, but like back then, a 10-second El Pres meant you were a god.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
New standards, new techniques,
Yeah, principles don't change because principles are physical. It's physics, right? It's physics, it's psychology, it's neurophysiology. Like that's science. Principles are science. But techniques are an art, and they keep getting better and better and better. And like any other art, it's got to match you.
Yeah.
Your physiognomy, your psychology, the way your personality works. Like it's what works for Bob Vogel or Ben Stoger or Scott Jedlinski. It may not be exactly how you need to do it, but the principles won't be any different.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Or look at the way the SMUs do CQB, right?
Yep.
Blue and green do things pretty differently, but if you look at the principles, not so different.
Yeah. Wildly different. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to different branches, watch the Marines do it, watch, SEALs or Rangers or SF or, JSOC unit. Wildly different. But it's what works for them,
Anybody who's good at it, the principles are the same. Just
Yep. Exactly.
As long as the techniques follow the principles, it's good. It's good to go.
Right.
And
So
I got real long-winded there. Sorry. I tend to wax philosophical. I get on my soapbox and I keep going.
Oh, I like it.
The point of all that was you have to experiment. You have to, like, have you ever read the Book of Five Rings?
I've heard of it. No, I haven't read it, but
Yeah, it's like it should be like it's right up there with all. It's like right there with Sun Tzu, right? But it was like his treatise on not just sword fighting, but strategy as a whole.
yeah.
But he breaks a lot of it down into like his individual techniques for like one-on-one fighting. At the end of each little section, it says something to the effect of, it depends on which translation you read, but it's something to the effect of, it is important to experiment with this in your own training. And that's kind of how I feel like shooting is, right? Like, yes, watch how this guy does it who's really good at it. And then you have to experiment to get that result. Because you can make a physical structure that looks just like his, but isn't following those principles because you may not have the right pressure. You may not be seeing the same thing he sees. You see what I'm saying? Like what I'm getting at?
Oh, yeah.
So what you need to replicate is not how he looks,
His success.
but his success.
Yeah.
Right. And what principles caused him. How he's interacting with the gun to get that success.
Absolutely. That's a really good way to put it. Kind kind of going back to what we say, and he said, how do you deal with students who believe their method is the best and won't try a different one? So the first thing that popped to mind was, you heard that like getting comfortable is like you're never going to get better kind of quote. Like we've all heard that. Once you're comfortable, you're never going to get better, progress, or anything like that. So I think that's part. A lot of people get comfortable. They're like, well, I learned this. It took me a long time. I'm not changing, learning something new. I just want to do this. Cool. I understand that. It's worked for you. We see a lot of guys in the military. This has always worked for me. I'm not doing this new shit. This worked for me. It's proven in, my deployments or whatever. I'm like, I got you, man. Cool. Whatever. But you can't argue with me. This way's better. My way's better. But anyway, when you get to this, talking about that too, my question is when people think like, no, my way is the best way. Okay. Well, have you proven that, through competition or real life or whatever? And the other question would be, how do you know it's the best if you haven't tried the others and seen if that makes you better? By collecting data, by giving an unbiased look at it and go, well, maybe I will be able to shoot sooner. Or maybe I can get that gun flat and use my retention technique instead of being just pinned on the hip, like all, Bonnie and Clyde spraying from the hip looking thing during concealed carry, do more with thumb pectoral. Maybe that would make sense for you. Whatever it is. When people say like, my way's the best, I'm not going to try anything else. I'm like, how do you know? Like, that's that smart ass, like, oh, really? Well, how do you know your way's the best? Have you tried the other ones? No. Well, this person who does that can do this much faster and more efficiently and saw this, this, and this, and does better at target identification drills or whatever it may be, or shoot through drills. Anything we can do to test some of that, because you can't argue with you doing it faster and exactly the same, but adhering to principles if you're looking at the tactical side of it. Whether you call them principles of trolling, but security and all that kind of stuff, exposure. Why not try it? But I think usually when people say that, it's because they just don't want to. They're just stuck in their way and they're just kind of that person, but maybe their way is the best for them, but you don't know if you don't at least try their things,
And like usually what I'll do, just kind of in like a low key way, I'll be like, hey man, just do me a favor. Just try this out. See if it works for you. See if you like it. Give it a fair shot. If you don't like it, it won't hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Not me. But at least just during the class, try it out, see how it works for you. Give it a fair evaluation.
Yeah. Show me you can do both. Like,
yeah.
No.
And
Let's see what else we got down here. Because of shooting. Oh, yep. He just said it. Show me you can do this too. Great minds think alike.
Yep.
Cool. So in a class, you kind of mentioned you can't get as much of that personal, feedback or critiques or cues or whatever. I know, like me, you do the same thing in a open enrollment class like we do now. We try and give those as much as possible. And you talked about how you phrase that information. How do you put that information out so that then, what do you keep for the initial brief on the drill, going over an explanation versus I'm going to save this stuff for one-on-one little quick fixes because maybe it's not going to affect everybody. Yeah. So how do you do that in a class?
And that's like, that is one of the things that I really care about in the class. Like it's important.
Yes. Yep.
Try to accumulate coaching cues. Like I want to collect them, right? Because people need different coaching cues based on how they learn, what their personality is. Like it, think about lifting weights, right? The coaching cue that may work for somebody on deadlifts may not work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Chest up may work for some people. Pushing the heels through the floor may work for somebody else. Like you've got to figure out what they need to hear to fix their form.
Bingo. Yep.
Yeah. And it's one of my personal goals as an instructor is to get a good enough lexicon of coaching cues that I can kind of walk down the line and go, hey, dude, try this.
Yeah.
And give them that little bit of a light bulb moment that helps them out.
So I've got one of those for you. You might like. So a lot of people like vision's a big one, right? Like vision is one of those things that's very, very, very hard to explain. And nobody ever explained it to me. Like when they're like, you just see the target or you see your sights and blurry and clear. And you're like, what the fuck does this even mean? Like I look like you're giving me astigmatism, like this is ridiculous. It's stupid, And one time someone's like, well, so I say I use the cue. I want you to notice your sights or I want you to see through your sights.
Yeah.
So I want you to, you're putting your sights in your line of sight, but I want you to see through it. And with both eyes open, you got these two, blah, blah, blah. It's not that they're blurry. It's not that this is clear or whatever. I'm just looking in that direction. I shift my focal plane somewhere in the middle, but I can see through that. And so see through your sights. But you can still tell kind of that's lined up with those two transparent, you know, that double vision you get.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, I'm not getting it. I was like, well, even though I'm like, you know, my hair's parted and I got my glasses on, I'm a little bit of a redneck at heart. So I was like, okay, this dude's from the South. He'll get this. I was like, you ever trim your lawn with like your edger, like your weed whacker, your weed eater? He's like, yeah, man. Hell yeah. All the time. I'm like, yeah, every week or 2 weeks. He's like, yeah. I go, you know, when you turn it upside down and you're doing the edging, but if you look at the actual line, you can't see the line spinning to cut straight. But if I kind of look through the line and I look at the concrete between the grass and I just notice how it's clipping the edges, I can stay so much straighter and smoother. And he was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. He's like, because I'm looking but I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing it. I was like, yes. And you're probably the only person in the world that would have got that besides me. But that makes total sense. And he got it like that. So if you can get those cues and just like talking about lexicon or relate it to people, an analogy, it's kind of like this, or like driving down the road. If you look at the ground right in front of you on a motorcycle, you're going to be jerky. But if I look down the road, everything kind of smooths out as I ride my motorcycle. Stuff like that, you know, or whatever it may be. But that, you're right, that's so important. And Seth told me this a long time ago. So, my buddy Seth, incredible guy, doctorate. I've talked about him a lot of times. Been a huge influence on me, and I always appreciate how much he's kind of helped me get better at teaching or telling me, hey, Drew, you fucking talk too much. Say more with less. I'm like, oh, you're right. Which I'm not doing right now, but whatever. I'm not in a class. So he would always explain that if you can phrase things one way, you'll reach a third-ish of your students. If you can phrase it two ways, you reach 2/3. You know, if you can phrase something 3 different ways, you're probably going to reach almost all those students if you can think of different ways to relate it to them or this or that. And I've always remembered that. So I'm like, oh, it's like a, you know, a drag tire, friction, you know, like you apply torque to this, or here's what you want to feel.
I'm stealing. It's stolen. You can tell your buddy I already stole that.
Yeah. I'm surprised. He'll sign on to these and watch, but yeah, he talked about how to, you know, set up like your template when you talk, when you teach. And not everything always follows this exact template, because sometimes it needs to be a little bit more, you know, by the numbers till they get it, then show this, learning points are out, and they go, oh, click, what's wrong? What's wrong? Well, now I know what right is. But he was like, you know, you give the what, give the why, so you can relate it to them, and that's your opportunity to relate this to them. So why do we need to do a high ready? Why do we want to get that gun flat? Because you're going to, you know, not have to line those sights up and down. If I know the slide's flat, then I only have to worry about this. And then you go into the how. So if you can take it and say, here's what we're doing, here's why we do it, relate it to them, and then you go through the how, then we can give those, you know, wrong ways to do it, right ways to do it, focus points as we go through, and then we can save the rest of it, the minor little cues, as it go down that line as much as we can in a class. And some classes are better than others, you know, you get to more people, but as best as we can go, hey, here's what you're doing, boom, 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 next, go to the next person. So I've always liked that way, and it's worked really well for me. But I think that why somebody's doing it is critical, especially nowadays. It's not like, you know, with previous generations of people that were going, you know, they're just like, I don't care. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and that's good enough. We got smartasses, and we're Gen Z or millennial, whatever the shit. And we're all like, why? Why do I want to do this? How does that work? It's like, well, it's great because people are smarter and they're showing up because they want to be here and they're paying a lot of money. But there's that, like, you better be able to have a reason for doing it and explain why. And then I think a lot of people get it faster. And I think it's like concept. It's the concept of teaching them the concept.
Well, and like, you just said something really important too. They get it faster, right? Because like we're talking about, the whole thing started, we're talking about the role of the instructor. Like, my whole goal with this is I don't want it to take as long for my students to get to the level they want to be at as it took me. You know what I mean? I want to kind of, there was a whole process I had to go through. First off, information wasn't as available then as it is now, for one thing.
Yeah.
But for the other, it's like, you know, you can slog away at this stuff. There's a lot of work into it. And if you don't really understand the most efficient way to learn it, it'll take you longer than it should.
Yeah.
And like, if I can help people out with that and get them to where they get to the level of mastery they want to be at, they don't have to go as far down the rabbit hole as, you know, not everybody has the same goals. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But if I can get them to like their personal level of mastery more efficiently and quickly, like give them at least a little clue or help that'll get them there without all the struggle. You still got to work hard. Don't get me wrong. You got to put in the work, and it's still a soul crushing junk punch because there's still a lot of frustration involved.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can eliminate some of the dead ends and some of the detours, you know what I mean? Like that's what I want to do.
Yeah, this is the frustrating. You said it right. This is frustrating. Like it's frustrating the students because they're like, it's just info dump, and they're like, oh, I'm trying to do this weird shit you said in your way and all this. It's like, hold on, it's your way. We're just trying to figure it out. But then on our side, it's frustrating because they're like, hey man, do that thing I've told you to do 10 times. You know, and the student's like, man, I'm really trying. I'm like, I know,
Yeah.
I know you're trying, but I need you to do it, or else you're just gonna keep messing up over and over. And then they do it, and they're like, "Oh, you're right." I'm like, "I know." It's like you paid me, but but it's frustrating on both. And I get it. Students show up, you know, and you see them frustrated, and that look on their face, like, "Holy crap!" You know, everything. Like, whoa. Understand, man. It's baby steps. Everything I've seen, you get faster, and I've seen you get better and more efficient. But now we know that there's a whole, like what success is not, you know, 5 meters from here, it's 100 meters from here. And it just seems a long drawn out process or unattainable.
Well, it's like, and being true to anything, it takes that emotional investment. You have to care that much about it to be really good at anything. You just do.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be that struggle, you know? It's like we got about a minute and a half left. So I'm gonna make sure that I figure out how to save this time.
It should be an option right there. So like as soon as you end, just wait. I think it pops right up.
But I'm not standing up until whatever buttons appear when we're done. Hopefully I can save this for sure.
Anything before we head out?
You know, dude, 1 hour never seems to be enough. Like
No.
we did this too.
I feel like we should start a podcast together.
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I'll hit you up as soon as we're done. And we'll talk about it. What do you guys think? What about our audience? Would you guys like a podcast? You want us to do this on a regular basis? See what they say.
Yeah. I'm sure they will. They have to. They tune in for this. Of course, they'll listen to a podcast.
Except for our buddies. They'll just slag on.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, hey, I appreciate it, dude. Thanks for having me on there.
Yeah, no. Let's I'll talk to you afterwards. Let's get something set up.
Sounds good, man.
I'm going to go and end it because we got 30